So how's your day so far, Aliki?
Good, good. Just still here working from home.
Nice. Well, before we started talking about season two of Doug Unplugs, I wanted to ask you when you first became involved with it. I understand you're a co-executive producer, but I imagine there's a lot of hats that go with that.
Yeah, so the show is based on a book or there are two books actually by amazing writer illustrator Dan Yacarino. And so he created the beginnings of this world. And DreamWorks fell in love with the project and picked it up, and it went into development with a writer named Jim Nolan. And Jim did a fantastic job, just building out the world and expanding from what Dan had created in his books. And at that time, I was working at DreamWorks on a show called Harvey Girls Forever. And so I really had just enjoyed my time working and developing um, a show with DreamWorks. And as I was rolling off that project, they were looking for somebody to come on and help continue to develop Doug Unplugs on more of the visual side. I'm a storyteller too, but my background really, stems from animation and storyboarding. Whereas Jim Nolan, his background is writing, and DreamWorks has this wonderful way of running their shows where they typically pair together people who have shared, not only shared skills, but specific skills too. Me coming from kind of the art side, and Jim coming from more of the writing side. So I got to come on when quite a bit of development had been done, but I got to further shape what the world would be, both visually and from a story standpoint. But the show had been sold to Apple pretty much at the moment that I came on.
Nice. So then you've been involved since last season, obviously.
Yes.
Um, I know that you are voicing a character in the show. Is that a new character for season two, or was she at all in season one?
Yeah, she was in season one. So with Princess Wolfingham, the character that I voice.
I didn't
Um,
want to say, I wanted to make you say her name.
oh, so with Princess Wolfingham, so basically, I have for quite a while now kind of just done a little bit of voiceover on the side, though my main focus and my main career is within animation, more on the creation side. But we were looking for a specific kind of character and sound for Princess Wolfingham. And we had brilliant actors come in that did really great takes, but it just wasn't exactly what we were looking for Princess Wolfingham. And I had it in my head, and I was like, can I just record myself even for scratch? Like, I think I know what we're trying to do here. And across the board, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is Princess Wolfingham. So I ended up getting to do the character, which was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. You keep talking about your background in animation and how essentially animation is what your main thing is. Would you say that's your main passion as far as the entertainment and animation world goes? Is the animation part of it?
Well, it's kind of interesting because that's what I thought brought me into this realm. Like as a kid, I was obsessed with cartoons. I was obsessed with the Disney films, and I, knew I wanted to be an animator when I grew up. I want to animate, I want to animate, I want to animate. And then I got into Disney features, and I spent some time in animation. And although I loved it so much, what I really found out about myself is that the thing that I had fallen in love with wasn't only the animation part of it, it was really the storytelling. It was the world building, it was the emotions, it was the creation of distinct characters that audiences fell in love with. Like it was so much bigger than only the performance part of creating these cartoons. So that's when I really started to listen to that and say, okay, I need to learn storyboarding, I want to learn more about writing, and kind of open myself up to a larger point of view of that
Be-
experience.
Do you think that once you started realizing that and about the world building and the storytelling, do you think that that now helps with your animation, telling the story with the animation that you make when you do that?
Yes, 100%, because everything, I've just come to a really deep understanding that everything has to inform the story. Everything. So the vocal performances, the music that's selected, the sound effects, the color styling, and the animation, it all has to inform the story. So even though we might choose some things that are just for fun or, because it's slapstick comedy or something visual, at the end of the day, we always have to bring ourselves back and ask ourselves, how is this serving the story? Sometimes serving a character or does serve the story because you want the audience to fall in love with the character, and that makes the story stronger. So everything to me always comes back to that, and because of that, it's made my animation vision much stronger and clearer.
So I know that you talked about you had done Disney movies back. I know you did Hercules, I think Tarzan, things like that. But this Doug Unplugs is computer generated animation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that you had to alter your vision a little bit for this kind of for this different kind of animation, or do you think dealing with computer generated animation kind of helped open your mind to a wider range of animated animation on a spectrum?
I think that's such a good question. And I've found, because I just had such a strong background in traditional 2D animation and, learning under people like Glenn Keane and Eric Goldberg and these greats that really understood true animation principles. I can't leave that behind. And what I've tried to do, even in the realm of CG, is to try to see how I can bring that understanding into CG. So, for instance, with Emma, for her, her character is, she's sprightly, she's positive, she's bouncy, she's a ball of energy and enthusiasm. And so, as an animator, I wanted to look at, how can I bring this in visually with her. And that meant talking to our CG team about, like, how can we get some squash and stretch in there? And how can we have, instead of even timing, how can we have snappier timing? And so it was really fun for me to, basically I would do drawings, obviously in 2D first, because I'm not a CG animator, but then it was like, okay, how can we translate this feeling into CG? And I feel like our team really successfully did that. And at the same time, Descendants was my first CG animated show, but they were shorts. Doug was my first, bigger, longer form series. So that's where I really got to see what the limits are of CG animation, but to not even look at it as a limit, to look at it as like, okay, these certain parameters that are there, how do you make them work for you and help you create stronger ideas, and maybe think a little, like, instead of something that's easy and obvious, like, how can you think of this in a creative way, since you have these limitations, but like for instance, I was just watching one of the episodes in season 2 where Doug wants to learn about what a play is. And I remember with in our music video, we just didn't have enough human characters to fill out an audience. And because our music videos were more artistic and more like, it was our place to suspend a little bit and do something a little more creative, more like music video like, um, we had this cool idea of like, well, why don't we use our chairs like cartoony audience members and like put our 2D faces on these chairs? And just watching it, it back, I was like, God, this turned out so fun. Like, we would have been like, let's just get a bunch of, humans and fill this as an audience. But because we had to find this creative solution, and it ended up being really like kid-like and fun and creative. And that's a kind of fun discovery that happens when you do have limitations that sometimes CG gives you. Although, even though there are other ways CG opens things up.
That's pretty cool because I feel like that will help you navigate and future forms of animation when you come to, those kind of what seems like a roadblock, but it's just like you said, that that kind of challenges your
Yeah.
creativity and
Absolutely.
raises the bar.
Mhm.
What about the I think the first season of Doug Unplugs, which came out in 2020, weren't half the episodes released, and then they released the second half later. Uh,
Mhm.
is that also what's happening with season two? Um, or is that not something that you know or can talk about?
It's definitely not something I can talk about.
Okay, understood.
um, yeah, these are things that are really considered and thought about from all aspects between from Apple to DreamWorks and just really thinking about what's best for the show. But they're definitely not things that I push any influence on, nor can I speak about if I had any info on it. So.
Well, you brought up music, so I want to ask a little bit about the music angle. Obviously, because you had mentioned there's some animatics done for the episode before the music video part itself is done. So I was curious exactly how does that come about? Are the episodes fully written and then the music is recorded? And then the animation, like you said, you go in after and clean things up and fix that? Or can you kind of explain how the process works with music being done on one end and the animation being done on the other end and bringing it together?
Yeah. It's a little bit of both, but typically the script informs what the song's going to be. So the song isn't written in the script, but we have a little bit of an idea of what the thrust of the song is going to be. So um, once we had a script semi finalized, we would go back to basically Doug's question because Doug always has a question, and that the music video answers the question, but then out of that music video he has a big question, and that takes us into the episode. So we would know in the script, for instance, I was talking about the play. He'd say, what is a play? So we would know when we had our meeting with our songwriters, this is kind of what the song's going to be about. And we would have just some little, like, sometimes we'd have like a catchphrase, or we'd have like a little line, like we'd be like, oh, we kind of like this type of thing or this kind of feeling, or we want this to feel like a Katy Perry fireworks song, or we would kind of have some directive to talk to our songwriters about. But then they would go off and start doing their song while the script was being storyboarded. So that would mean that sometimes when we got to the music video part of it in the storyboard, we if we didn't have the song yet, we would just put some images that are like, we kind of know we're going to have this, we kind of know there's going to be something like this, but it wouldn't be fully boarded yet until we would get a song demo. So that meant that sometimes it would come in towards the end of our storyboard term, or sometimes it might come after, and we would need to go back in and storyboard that sequence.
That's really cool. The as far as the fact that this was one of to come back to one of the earlier points you made, this was initially a book that has been adapted to an animated series. Um, do you feel like there were any restrictions, or because it was already an intellectual property, or do you feel like it was more of there are things established that you could build upon and you kind of had more of a roadmap?
I mean, what was great is that Danny was involved in the process, so it wasn't like there was this book, and then you know Jim and then me, like we went off and did our thing. Like he was a part of it, so he was in. He would. This was before even the pandemic hit, where he would call in from New York for meetings and such. So there was a lot of discussion, and Dan was never like, "What are you doing to my book?" or "Where this is too much," or "Where did this character come from?" He was always really agreeable and excited, and thought the ideas were really fun. So we definitely didn't feel any kind of restriction. I mean, I think like one of the things, and it wasn't a restriction, but Danny has this really wonderful kind of shape language that feels almost like a cool kind of retro kind of thing. But with CG space, with being more three dimensional, that was something where it was like, okay, how do we translate this yellow robot that is graphic into an actual golden metallic CG character? So stuff like that was really up to us to find solutions for.
That's cool. Now, I know we're running out of time. I wanted to know if there's anything that you can say to people who haven't seen Doug Unplugs that you feel like it offers that maybe other animations don't, like anything that makes Doug Unplugs specifically unique, whether from your perspective or something that you've heard from children who've seen it.
What I think is so special and what piqued my interest to even work on this show was this idea that in our show, we're not saying that technology is bad. We're saying that there is, we all plug in. Like that's the reality of the time we're living in, and the time our children are living in. I mean, my daughter uses iPads at school. There's a time to plug in, and Doug plugs in to find out, and he gains information by doing so. But then there's a time to unplug and have an experience. And that's what I think is such a wonderful thing about our show and the messaging that is so apropos right now, especially after a year of depending on plugging in, is, this message in every episode that, we get to learn so much and we get access to so much great information when we plug in. But then the most important thing is to take that and go out into the world and have an experience and see what new questions come up and where our curiosity can take us because we're having a life experience, especially with the best pal like Doug does with his friend Emma.
That was so wonderfully worded. And because you said plug so many times, my last question, is there anything that you'd like to plug outside of this series or anything, Doug Unplugs adjacent that you guys have going on? Or just any last things that you'd like to say before I wrap?
No, I mean, as far as plugs, I think that Twitter and Instagram has a great Dreamworks Junior social imprint, and so it's great to follow along over there. My Instagram is Aliki Greeky. If anybody wants to follow my adventures and my artwork and my crazy family, but yeah, that's about it, I think.